Hi, everyone. I'm Beth Dorman. I'm the president and CEO of For All Seasons, and we are so excited that you're here with us tonight. I have to tell you that I was running a little bit late taking kids to baseball before I got here, and I was just so overjoyed by the number of people that were here to join us and be able to connect with all of you from different organizations. It really is heartwarming to know that our community is showing up in ways that really matter, and we are just grateful that you're here tonight. I do want to recognize some really special people that have made it to our event. Frank Gonzalez, our Easton Town Council president, Melissa Kelly of Care First, who is also the chair of our board of directors, Mike Flaherty, Ron Frampton, and Shay Lewis-Cisco, who serve on our board of directors, and Karen Kaludis, who is one of the founders of our agency, and we're really glad that you're here with us tonight. Thank you. I also want to acknowledge Tina Kintop, who's here with us. She's the Director of Emergency Services for Talbot County. We've been doing a lot of work with our first responder community, and I want to say thank you to you for being here and honoring all that you and your team do in our community. And last but not least, when you serve as the CEO of an organization, you have an opportunity to meet some really important and just wonderful people in the community. And sometimes you have someone who you meet that becomes a shining star, not because of anything other than just they want to give and they want to support. And we are losing one of our shining stars in the state of Maryland as he is traveling across west to move into a new location. And I just want to acknowledge Charlie Lever, who has been a member of our committees for years and years. Charlie has served tirelessly as an ambassador and on our finance committee. And as I said to Karen during the cocktail hour, Zoom works really well from Colorado, so don't worry. We're not looking for you to completely leave. But just thank you, Charlie, for all that you've done. I know this is your last event in person with us for a while, so we appreciate you. I also want to give a huge thanks to the Governor's Office of Prevention and Policy. We receive over $4 million a year from the Governor's Office to be able to support the rape crisis services, and specifically for this program tonight, our services with supporting anti-human trafficking and the work that we're doing. So a huge thank you to the Governor's Office for the support that they provide. If you're new to our circle, I want to share with you a little bit about For All Seasons. For All Seasons is the largest behavioral health and rape crisis center serving the Mid-Shore, bringing rape crisis services to nearly a quarter of the state of Maryland. We provide life-saving therapy and psychiatry services throughout the state, in person through our 6 Mid-Shore offices. We now have an office at Chesapeake College, and with public schools embedded therapists. Statewide, we provide a robust telehealth program. Every single day, people from our community walk into For All Seasons needing help. And over the last 2 years, we've worked incredibly hard to create what is called the Open Access Program. And so where you used to call our office and be told that there was a 3, 6, 8, 12-month wait list, we now have folks walking in our office and are being served that day, every day, without a wait list. It's an incredible program that there are less than 500 agencies across our country implementing, and we owe a huge thank you to Michael Flora from MTM Services, who has worked with our team over these last 2 years to make sure that we can serve the community in the best way possible. Tonight, we are here to raise awareness about human trafficking, discuss how it takes our entire community working in collaboration to respond to this crisis, and you are a key component of all of it. Because the reality is human trafficking is here. I know it's hard to imagine. Many of us think about human trafficking as a crime that happens over there or to those people, whether it's in big cities or places internationally. But the truth is that human trafficking is happening right here in Maryland and on the shore. That's why For All Seasons has joined with the other 16 rape crisis centers across the state of Maryland and become a regional Navigator program to respond and prevent human trafficking. As a regional Navigator, For All Seasons has a comprehensive anti-human trafficking program that offers services across the spectrum of care, From our Rape Crisis Center providing support services, to our clinicians and psychiatrists providing expert mental health services, to our case managers coordinating referrals for additional care, and to the Center for Learning for providing trainings and for spreading awareness to our community. Our anti-human trafficking efforts focus on a team-based approach. We collaborate with law enforcement, first responders, the Department of Social Services and Child Advocacy Centers, school administrators, teachers, the hospitals, officials from the town and counties that we serve, and with you, the members of the community that we serve. Throughout this speaker series event tonight, I invite you to consider how you see yourself in this work. From connecting your workplace or where you volunteer, a community group that you're a part of, where we can bring free human trafficking trainings to everyone, to volunteering with For All Seasons to help further our work, to donating and supporting our round-the-clock care. And we have something very special for you tonight, a message from Comptroller Brooke Learman. Comptroller Learman played an instrumental role in creating and passing the legislation that created Maryland's Regional Navigator Program when she served as a legislator.
Greetings. I'm Brooke Learman, Maryland's 34th Comptroller. I'm proud to support For All Seasons in its critical work combating human trafficking and supporting survivors across our state. According to the National Human Trafficking Hotline, in 2021 alone, Maryland reported 118 cases of human trafficking involving 173 victims. This figure includes both sex and labor exploitation. Child sex trafficking is also a serious concern. Since 2012, over 500 children have been identified to Child Protective Services as reportedly being trafficked in Maryland, though this remains vastly underreported. Estimates indicate 1 in 7 missing children in the United States is estimated to be trafficked. As a delegate, I was proud to sponsor and pass the Child Sex Trafficking Screening and Services Act in 2019. This act established the Safe Harbor Regional Navigator Grant Program, ensuring victim-centered and trauma-informed services for youth victims of sex trafficking. This program now supports survivors of trafficking by creating and sustaining projects prioritizing survivor needs, facilitating coordination among agencies to respond more effectively, guaranteeing access to crucial services, expanding Maryland's capacity to combat sex trafficking, and training providers to identify and assist survivors. Regional navigators like For All Seasons play a pivotal role as designated service providers. Survivors of trafficking require specialized, coordinated care, and the Regional Navigator Program offers a cohesive response system, creating consistency across jurisdictions and preventing survivors from falling through the cracks, which can happen in a patchwork approach. Survivors in many parts of Maryland do not have access to specialized services, and this model now ensures that every region in the state is covered, with coordination through the Governor's Office of Crime Control and Prevention. There's work that each of us can do to end trafficking and support survivors of sexual violence. As Comptroller, I'm committed to ensuring immediate access to services for every survivor of sex trafficking in Maryland. And I am so grateful to the staff, the team, the leadership of incredible regional navigators like For All Seasons. You are essential to the safety and wellness of our communities. Please continue to reach out and share your ideas about how we can continue to work in partnership. Thank you all for your amazing efforts.
Brooke was unable to be with us tonight because she's at another event in Baltimore, but I will tell you that we have formed a wonderful friendship with Brooke from our agency, and to have our comptroller supporting the work that we are doing, calling our cell phone and saying, hey, I'm just checking in. It's been a wonderful way to be able to really see through the vision that she shared and was a part of to make the Regional Navigator Bill happen. And now I get the fun job of introducing our two speakers for the evening. Tom Stack is a statewide expert on the issue of human trafficking in Maryland. He currently serves as the Anti-Human Trafficking and Sexual Assault Response Manager in the Baltimore Mayor's Office of Neighborhood Safety and Engagement. He co-chairs the Baltimore City Human Trafficking Collaborative and has previously managed anti-human trafficking efforts at the Maryland Governor's Office of Crime Control and Prevention. Mr. Stack has extensive law enforcement experience, retiring after more than 26 years, including 14 years in the Montgomery County Police Department's Vice and Intelligence Unit. During this period, he was involved in over 450 human trafficking and related cases. He also has been an integral part of significant investigations and legislative testimonies enhancing policies on combating human trafficking. After Tom speaks, we will welcome Heather Amador to the stage, who is a partner of ours within the Governor's Office. Heather is a leader at the Governor's Office of Crime Prevention and Policy, having joined in 2019 after spending 21 years at the Anne Arundel County State's Attorney's Office. She's held various critical roles, including the Director of Victim Services, where she managed a large team that handled sensitive caseloads in homicide, child abuse, and sex crimes. Heather has had deep experience and expertise in victim support. She's been involved in various councils and response teams focusing on domestic violence, victim services, sexual assault throughout the state, and she's been there for every moment for our victims. Her dedicated service has been recognized with a governor's citation acknowledging her efforts to transform the victim service landscape in the state of Maryland. We are really, really blessed to have the two, both Tom and Heather, be able to be here with us tonight. And so I'd like to welcome Tom to the stage.
Thanks, Beth Ann. Thanks, everybody, for having me over here on the Eastern Shore. I love coming over here. I love coming across the bay. I don't like doing it in rush hour traffic, but I love coming over here. But thank you for having me here. Like Beth Ann said, my name is Tom Stack, and I'm the Anti-Human Trafficking and Sexual Assault Response Manager in Baltimore City. I've been there for about 6 years. Before that, I did 2.5 years with the Governor's Office, and then most of my career where I really learned what human trafficking is and what it isn't was as a detective for Montgomery County Police. During that time, I was also a task force officer with the FBI, working on the Maryland Child Exploitation Task Force, because that was one of those things that I really wanted to do, is get kids off the street. Get kids off the street and out of being trafficked and get them some help. And I was lucky enough to do some really, really good cases. But now I put I do use my law enforcement career because I do a lot of training and teaching to law enforcement to change their mindset, get them away from what they think human trafficking is and what prostitution is, and let them open their eyes a little bit, because that's what happened to me. When I first got to our vice unit, I came from a street crimes unit. We were locking people up right and left for drugs, robberies, doing all kinds of crazy stuff, playing hide and seek. You know, it was like cops and robbers, hide and seek. And I went to the vice unit, and I kind of wanted to do the same thing. And I was like, let's just go lock everybody up. Those girls are prostitutes. That's crime. Let's go lock them up. But, man, I was wrong. And I admit it. And sometimes that's hard for a cop to do, to admit they're wrong. But I was wrong because I looked at prostitution as a victimless crime. I looked at it like, oh, if he wants to have sex and she wants to have sex and he wants to pay for it, who cares? But man, I started to see the cases. I started to do the Latino brothels and the massage parlors, and then the internet blew up, and I started seeing these kids out on the street. I had 2 cases involving 13-year-old girls. One was being trafficked by a pimp. She was a runaway, missing kid. And the other one was being trafficked by her mother, who was forcing her to go out and have sex so that she can make money, so she could support her drug habit. We see that. We see that a lot. So I changed the way I look at things, and I teach law enforcement now to change the way they look at things, to look at anybody that's in sex work, whether they're being trafficked or not. Look at them as a victim first. I can tell you right now that nobody in sex work, whether they're doing it by exploitation or necessity, ever aspired to be a prostitute. Hundreds of girls I talked to, and I would ask them, I know this is not what you thought your life was going to be. So you have to remember that none of them ever aspire to be a prostitute. They become victims of circumstance, whether it's financial or drug-related. A lot of it's drug-related, especially in Baltimore where I'm at. We got it really bad up there. And you have it bad here down on the Eastern Shore as well. It's either circumstance or exploitation. And a lot of times it starts out as circumstance and becomes exploitation because of the vulnerabilities. Now, what is human trafficking? There's two forms of human trafficking. There's sex trafficking and there's labor trafficking. Most of what you hear on TV and on the radio or to see on the internet, it's sex trafficking. It's right out in front of you. In Baltimore, we have walking up and down the street. We have it in the strip clubs on the block. We have it on the internet. So sex trafficking is compelling somebody to engage in commercial sex through force, fraud, or coercion. By using fraud or coercion to compel that person to engage in a sex act, a commercial sex act, which could be prostitution, stripping, or pornography. Or if that person is under the age of 18, they're automatically a victim of human trafficking, which is really important. So that's what Comptroller Learman was talking about with the safe harbor. We worked for years to get prostitution off the books for minors. If you're 18, you're 17, you're 16, you're 15, you're engaged in commercial sex, you're automatically a victim of human trafficking. So how can you be a victim of a crime and a perpetrator of the same crime? It makes no sense, right? So we finally got rid of that. All right, we went with a bunch of the other states and we got rid of that. Now, labor trafficking is compelling somebody to engage in forced labor through force, fraud, or coercion. But there's no under the age of 18. So if you're 16 and you're forced to go work in a sweatshop and to make no money, or under the threats of like, I'll have you deported, or I'll beat you, or I'll beat your family, I'll kill your family, under those threats, that's human trafficking. And you're 16, you have to prove force, fraud, or coercion if it's labor trafficking. With sex trafficking, again, it's not. So up in Baltimore, we have a lot of human trafficking. The state of Maryland has a lot of human trafficking. You have it here on the shore as well. We're going to talk about that as we go through the evening. But so, just why Maryland? Why is Maryland such a hotbed for human trafficking? Anybody? Major highways, airports, casinos, sporting events, right? We got the Preakness coming up in a couple of weeks, all right? We're going to have 130,000 people coming into the city of Baltimore. Traffickers know that, and they bring their victims there to exploit that. Also, Maryland has a toxic mixture of poverty and wealth. So think about it, especially in Baltimore. I mean, you can go 2 streets over, and you have one of the most impoverished neighborhoods in the United States. And 2 streets over, you have tremendous wealth. So poverty is a major risk factor for exploitation. It's a huge risk factor. And then that wealth is what fuels the sex trade. It fuels. Those are the buyers of sex. Those are the buyers of people. They're going out and purchasing a person for their pleasure. And that's one of the reasons that Maryland has a lot of human trafficking here. But we've also done some really good stuff. I mean, the state of Maryland has really been on the forefront, especially in Baltimore. Some of the stuff that we've done, I've been there for 6 years. We had nothing. When I came there, I started the Human Trafficking Collaborative up there with Councilman Chris Burnett, and we have about 60 different stakeholders. We have 5 subcommittees. We have a legislative subcommittee. We have a public awareness subcommittee, a victim services, a law enforcement subcommittee, and we just started a couple years ago our medical subcommittee. We have an amazing program called the Blue Dot Program, which runs out of Mercy Medical Center. It is a game-changing program, a gold standard of victim services that we developed in the city of Baltimore that's not replicated anywhere else in the United States. We built it from scratch, and it's basically a 24/7, 365, one-stop shop to get victims off the street from an emergency situation by a first responder, whether it's law enforcement or if it's a fire department personnel, because we've trained all the entire fire department in the city of Baltimore on how to find victims of trafficking and what to do with them when they find them. And you take them to the Blue Dot. And Blue Dot is basically, it's a conduit from that emergency situation to services on the back end. Okay, well, and we work with For All Seasons down here. They're part of the Blue Dot program. Even though it's kind of a hike, just don't go during rush hour. You get there in no time, all right? But it's right there. But we're all part of the team. It's all part of the team. That's what we do here in Maryland. Because one person or one agency cannot do it alone. It has to be a collaborative effort. If it's not a collaborative effort, we will fail 100%. That's why we've done such great stuff in Baltimore and also in Maryland, because we work as a team. We work as a team, and that's the most important thing. So I think that's about my time limit, but I'm going to be up here for a little bit longer answering some questions for you, and I'm going to pass the microphone off to my good friend Heather Amador, who works where I used to work at the governor's office, and we work very closely together. Heather?
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us here tonight. This is definitely a topic that's very near and dear to me. I've worked in victim services for about almost 27 years. Unlike Tom, I did not have to battle the traffic to get here because I live here. I am a Caroline County resident. I was born and raised in Anne Arundel County, but moved to the Eastern Shore in, let me think. It's been almost 19 years, I'll put it to you that way. So I've been here for quite a while. I've raised my children here. I've created a life here. And slowly but surely, I have seen the same Western Shore problems that I worked at the state's attorney's office encountering creeping over here. They've always been here, but I was not really in a position, feeling very insulated in my elementary school age children's lives and then middle school age children's lives, and working very closely with all of my Anne Arundel County ties, that I didn't really take an opportunity to see what trafficking was like over here, but it's here. I know that now. I knew that before I came to the governor's office, but it's one of those things that I think you just kind of like to think that it's really not here. We used to see that with sex crimes cases even. People don't want to believe that it's happening. People don't want to believe that their neighbors are capable of those things. People don't want to believe that they're ignoring the signs of the things that are occurring in their community. So I was a victim advocate in Anne Arundel County. So I had a lot of extensive training as a forensic interviewer, a bunch of different protocols, learning how to ask the best possible questions to get the best possible answers, and learn just how to talk to people and relate to people and help them through the criminal justice process. I worked primarily my first 14 years in the juvenile division, but I also had the human trafficking and the animal cruelty and the automobile fatalities at that point. In the human trafficking cases, they were always complicated. The joke in the state's attorney's offices is that if it's a really pretty put together case, the federal government's taking it. So really anything that's considerably complicated is what's left to be prosecuted at the state level. So we had the cases with the uncooperative witnesses. We had the cases where victims weren't cooperative or were testifying on behalf of their offenders, and we were proceeding with other types of things like telephone records or receipt records or cooperation of the sex buyers and things like that. So they were always very complicated cases that never really were wrapped up in that beautiful little package with a bow on top. So we met and worked with a lot of victims that really wanted nothing to do with us. And I would have plenty of opportunities, and we're talking adults and children alike, and I would have plenty of opportunities to meet with both and kind of talk through court prep and get a feel for what they're going to say, even if we know they're not going to say what they've said before, even if we know they're going to say things that didn't really happen, but just to get a feel for that. But it helps you to relate to people on a different level, and it helps you to learn to recognize the fears and the other reasons that people don't come forward with things like this. And a big part of that, actually, is a lot of human trafficking victims don't identify as a victim. They see themselves as participatory. They see this as something they are voluntarily engaging in because they don't understand the force, the fraud, and the coercion that comes along with it. They don't see how they've been led down this path or deceived into this or forced into addiction or forced to do it to help someone else. And one of the things I always tell people, at the state's attorney's office, I was a part of an MDT because I was a forensic interviewer, and we screen these types of cases, especially for children. My last 7.5 years I was there, I worked primarily in sex crimes, child abuse, and homicide. And of course, that included child trafficking. And we had a child trafficking victim who was flat out uncooperative. She was refusing in any capacity to work with us or talk to us. And, you go back to your forensic interview skills and you back off and you start talking about things you think would be engaging if they want to talk about, and build a little bit more of a rapport and get back into questions. And I try to build in some education in there about, without it looking like it's a direct reflection on what their circumstances, but try to build a little bit of education about how sometimes people are deceived into doing things and thinking that they are cooperating, and build those types of conversations. And at some point, I don't remember exactly what I said, but she was kind of nodding along, and she had been in a runaway situation. She was an endangered runaway. And at some point, I said, so where do we go from here? You're sitting here in my office. We're talking about these things that I know you don't want to talk about, and I don't really want to talk about them either. I'd rather talk about anything else in this world with you. But how do you think we got here? And she looked at me and she said, well, I don't know how to be a plumber. And I just kind of looked at her like, what do you mean? And she said, well, I needed to make money, and I don't know how to be a plumber. I mean, everybody says go out and get a job, but if you don't have certain skills, you can't get a job and support yourself, and I needed to support myself. And she had fallen into a trafficking situation because she needed housing. She was a runaway. She had nowhere to go. So she found a friend, somebody that she still saw as a friend, and she felt like cooperating with me was very much betraying this friend. And he gave her a place to live in exchange for forced prostitution. Of course, she didn't see it as forced because she felt as if she was cooperating. But there were beatings, there was forced addiction, there were all of the things that we know that sometimes go along with these types of situations. But it's helping victims to recognize that, and sometimes it's people from the outside, like everybody in this room, that has an easier time seeing it than a victim does. Back to my current job at the Governor's Office of Crime Prevention and Policy. I am the Director of Victim Services Policy and Programs there, so I do a lot with grant funding. And the Regional Navigator program kind of fell into my lap because of my involvement with grant funding. And back at the very beginning of the pandemic, in March of 2020, our Director of Anti-Human Trafficking position became vacant. We were under a hiring freeze because of the pandemic, and I was the only person that had any type of direct human trafficking experience, so I volunteered to take on those responsibilities and build the program. As you heard Comptroller Learman say, it was a brand new program. It was born out of the Child Sex Trafficking Screening and Services Act of 2019, and we're talking in March of 2020. So it was a brand new program, and I had the opportunity to really kind of look and see what the issues were, and started kind of doing some polling and looking at what things were like across the state, and I very quickly realized that this program was going to look different in every jurisdiction. The resources available, the resources needed are going to look very different in Baltimore City versus here in Talbot County. They are going to look, the access to those resources, public transportation looks different in those regions and jurisdictions. So it really was very eye-opening for me how much work needed to be done. Since that time, when I first came on, we had 3 regional navigator programs across the state. And just for a little backstory with that as well, it was born out of the Child Sex Trafficking Screening and Services Act, but it's not really just serving children. They actually serve young adults up to age 24. And they provide a variety of different resources, case management, helping victims and survivors find addiction resources, any type of mental health counseling. Anything that you can think of, the Regional Navigator now can pretty much assist with. And we've learned that coordinated response and that continuity of contact is really critical. Just like with domestic violence, human trafficking victims really very rarely accept assistance or services or support the first time they are encountering somebody who can offer those things. More often than not, you are going to have 3, 4, 5, 10, 15 contacts with someone before they really are at a point where they feel comfortable accepting services. And we've learned that a lack of resources is a lack of cooperation and a lack of accepting assistance, because if it's not there and they know they can't count on it, they don't want any parts of you. They'd rather survive in the situation that they are in that at least feels familiar. I mean, I think if I'm not alone in this room, I don't really embrace change all that much. Anything that feels foreign feels uncomfortable, and a trafficking situation is no different for a survivor. They really look for something that feels familiar, and if you can't offer something where they know this is happening today, that this is happening tomorrow, this is happening the next day, I'm going to be here for you to count on me this day, the next day, the next day. You can come back to this program. Even if you walk away, you can come back. If you don't offer that level of service, you will not get cooperation from most of these victims. Because again, What feels familiar, it feels better than the unknown. So making sure that you can outline for those victims all of the services that you can offer, we recognized was going to be a critical component of the success of the Regional Navigator program. We looked to each jurisdiction in each region to identify their resources, and then we will now at the governor's office work to direct funding to where those resources are lacking. We know that you're going to have more people to serve in Baltimore City, and you're also going to have more resources immediately available than you are over here. It is just the nature of our geographical region across the state. It's just going to look different everywhere. And we are working really hard to make sure that we are providing and directing the funding where it needs to go to support all victims and survivors. So we are currently working with programs like For All Seasons to develop a standard operating procedure so that we can take a deep look and develop a minimum standard of care for those navigators. One of the other things about the Regional Navigator program is it does require by law that the local Department of Social Services and the local law enforcement make a referral to the Regional Navigator if they come into contact with a known or suspected victim of child sex trafficking. Now, that does not mean it has to be confirmed. That does not mean it has to be an active investigation. It can literally just be a hunch or a circumstance that looks like something is off. And that is because we're really hoping to get to people sooner rather than later, so we can have those repeated contacts before someone is actually ready to engage with resources and services. So working and developing the Regional Navigator program, and we do now have regional navigators in every jurisdiction of the state. That is a brand new development. Allegheny County was our last county to come on, but we do now have full coverage in every jurisdiction of the state. So all 24 jurisdictions, 23 counties plus Baltimore City, now have a Regional Navigator program supporting their victims of child sex trafficking. And in some of those jurisdictions, they actually are already serving labor trafficking victims as well if they have the capacity to do so. We certainly want to see any trafficking victim be supported if they have the resources to do just that. So thank you so much for your time this evening, and I will pass it back off and look forward to answering some questions.
Thank you so much, Heather and Tom. And as we get set for our panel discussion, I just want to bring to light some other folks that are in the room with us. You know, For All Seasons is an organization that has really dug into anti-human trafficking, and I serve as the chair of the board for the Maryland Coalition Against Sexual Assault, in addition to working locally with For All Seasons. And one of the things that we know and that we are continuously told by the governor's office and the MCASA team is that For All Seasons is helping to really lead the Regional Navigator programs. And you heard Tom refer to the fact that we are a part of the Blue Dot program already. Christy Mirando is our Director of Victim Services. She's in the back sitting next to Lisa Lee, our Chief Clinical Officer. We have an incredible team at For All Seasons who has dug into this program to make sure that when victims are walking through our doors, we are skilled up. And part of our Center for Learning, which is led by Lauren Weber, is really about making sure that when folks are walking through our doors, clinicians understand the culture of human trafficking so that when folks are coming and sitting down and needing therapy and needing psychiatry, our team is prepared to be able to share that information. I also want to just call attention to Katie Tiki and the marketing that you've seen behind you. Along with Mayor McCardle, Katie Tiki, and Amy Stewart, who is one of our writers for what you see in advertisements and then in the paper. It's really important that when we are looking at human trafficking, we're showing people that it's here. Because as you'll hear tonight, we're going to talk a little bit more now with the panel discussion. You know, Tom's referring to Baltimore City, Heather's referring to Anne Arundel County, but the beauty of this program tonight is you're going to get to understand how it really impacts here where you live, to be able to understand that it isn't just across the bridge, that it is right here where we live. And For All Seasons has continued to be an entity that is pivoting and growing as the changes are happening within the trajectory of the client services that we provide. So I'd like to welcome to the stage Tom and Heather. And I'm also really honored to also introduce to you Susan Ahlstrom. Susan's our regional navigator at For All Seasons. She leads the implementation in our anti-human trafficking program. She brings her expertise as a mental health and wellness counselor In her first role with For All Seasons, she worked as the TAMAR, which is the Trauma, Addictions, Mental Health, and Recovery Coordinator for female detainees at the Dorchester County and Caroline County Detention Centers. Each day, Susan works alongside our team in the Rape Crisis Center and with our mental health clinicians to mitigate the upward trend in human trafficking. So I am really just excited to sit here with all of you tonight. We love our little Oprah talkback part of our panel discussion because it's really an opportunity for us to dig into some of these issues a little bit deeper. And as we were talking this week and really talking about the important pieces, I want to start with a topic that has been really kind of in our community, and the talk has been there. And one of the things that we know is that both locally and at the state, what does human trafficking look like? We've talked about that as just a general topic. And we know that in our region, we have seen things like the Sound of Freedom movie come into movie theaters. And it came out in the past couple of years, and it painted a picture of human trafficking as an over-there problem in different countries. And so one of the things I'd really love to start with, because we have talked a lot about human trafficking and how it shows up in different regions, but we'd really like to understand from, and Tom, I'm going to ask you to take this question as a start, but reinforcing the idea that human trafficking isn't the creepy white man in the van, or it's not the boogeyman jumping out of the bushes. But if you could help us really understand when we take things that might be seen for the first time, how do we break down some of those stereotypes about really how human trafficking shows up right here on the Eastern Shore?
Sure. The movie, Julia Roberts in Pretty Woman, forget it. Okay, it's nonsense. And the movie Taken 1, 2, 3, 4, I think they're up to 6 or 7 now. Great movie. Forget it. It's nonsense. It's Hollywood. It's not what we really see. There's not going to be a white van that's going to pull up, open the door, grab a kid, and off they go. Has it happened? Yes, it has happened. Lightning strikes happen also. Okay, it's not the way it happens. It's all about grooming in the process. And I look at the Eastern Shore here, and so before the internet, traffickers would go to shopping malls. They would go to bus stations, high schools, also any place where a missing kid or a runaway might hang out, the subway station, to recruit. That's where they would go and recruit, especially shopping malls, like in the food court in a shopping mall on a day like today, when the kids are supposed to be at school, and they're going to go there and they're going to see a young 14, 15-year-old kid sitting there by herself. They're going to know that there's something up. That kid's either got low self-esteem, has problems that they ran away from home, but they think they can fix them. But they don't need to do that anymore because they have the internet. And unfortunately, the kid who lives here in Easton, what's the closest shopping mall? Salisbury or Annapolis?
Queenstown Outlets.
Oh, the outlets. I don't count the outlets. The
That's our closest
mall.
small town.
The closed mall. They don't need to go there anymore. The traffickers can reach them right in their own rooms, right there on their cell phone. Kids, that's one of the vulnerabilities of kids is they're kids. They're adolescents. They're very, very vulnerable. They're very. You can groom them so easily, and a trafficker will literally sit and open up their internet and start browsing Instagram or Snapchat, one of those apps, and they can look at the pictures and see exactly who they're dealing with, and they're looking for those kids with low self-esteem and problems at home, and so they'll look at pictures and they're like, oh, this girl here, she's the volleyball team, straight A student, she has lots of pictures with all her friends. They're not going to mess with her. But the one who's complaining about their mom, hates school, doesn't have friends, shows that low self-esteem, that's who they're going to attack. And they can do it now anywhere. So you look at human trafficking here on the Eastern Shore, of course you have Route 13 coming through Salisbury, which is a traditional route. Used to be for drug smugglers. You used to go up and down 13 to stay off I-95 to stay away from the police. and they would go up and down 13. But now they're using it as a human trafficking route, because what's at the other end of 13 when you go across the bay? Norfolk, Virginia Beach, largest naval base in the world. Lots of customers there, and the traffickers know that. So, yeah, there are spots that they'll traffic. Salisbury had a big case. I think the guy got 65 years for trafficking somebody. There was a case in Denton, is that correct? For a 15-year-old girl was being trafficked at one of the hotels there. It's happening here, but you also look at that where they're trafficking them, but they're also looking, you also have to think of where they're luring them from. They're taking them from the Eastern Shore. Hey, meet me in Annapolis, and next thing you know, they're in Baltimore, and next thing you know, they're in New York. All right, and then they're bouncing all over the place. So you got to look at that as well.
Yeah, I would just piggyback off of this by saying that a lot of times, because I did spend so much time at the state's attorney's office, and I know my local law enforcement very well, I will get called to essentially consult or to answer some questions or to give some advice or to help find resources. And there was a situation on the shore that I was asked to weigh in on. That was a 14 or 15-year-old girl. I don't remember exactly how old she was. I just know she was in high school. The high school had somehow identified that she was selling pictures and videos of herself, obviously performing sex acts, sometimes masturbation, things like that. She was selling them. They had just fallen into the lap of an administrator because another student had stumbled across it accidentally. And to make a very long story short, it was a situation where she was selling those videos because her mother was incarcerated, and she was in a situation where she was living with a very young 22-year-old female relative who was having a difficult time making ends meet. And I don't know where, because I tried not to fully engage, not knowing if I would encounter this person, but I do know that at the time that I had the conversation with law enforcement, that they were doing some search warrants and getting some information from some cell phones, but they believed that this was at the direction, or at the very least the encouragement, of that female relative, who I guess was also participating in the same type of activity, but as an adult, voluntarily and legally, but requiring or encouraging a child to do that would be something that would be in line with sex trafficking. It is at least, at the very least, something that this person was encouraging. They can't say at the time I talked to them, they couldn't say with absolute certainty that this was something that was required for the child to remain in the home. But those are the types of situations where things like this happen. I've regularly said that when I was a part of an MDT at the state's attorney's office, we regularly missed the mark on looking at some some sexual child abuse cases as sex trafficking. We regularly miss the mark on looking at them under that lens. You might have a child who, if they miss the bus, they're required to perform a sex act on mom's boyfriend to get a ride to school. I had a situation, a case in Anne Arundel County where a child was required to perform a sex act to get lunch money in her lunch account. Things like that are trafficking. If you look at it under that lens, it is a child is essentially having survival sex at that point. In order to have resources for survival, they are, being put into a position of being required to perform those types of acts. And we saw many of those cases and just didn't really look at them under a trafficking lens. We charged the appropriate sexual assault charges, the sexual child abuse charges, but we missed looking at some of those circumstances under a trafficking lens.
So we've talked a little bit about the technology. I'm curious if you could continue to share with the audience some more of the red flags that would be important, because I'm sure that there are some of you who are sitting in the audience saying, okay, we're not in the state's attorney's office, or I don't have a law enforcement background, so how does this relate back to my everyday life, and what do I need to look for in my job at the hospital or with the emergency services, or just as an everyday layperson in our community? What are some of those red flags that we need to be aware of and just be knowledgeable about?
Sure, and I'll give a couple, and I'm sure you'll probably pile on a couple more. One is tattoos. Traffickers will brand their victims just like a farmer brands his cow, because to him, that's his property. That's his money, and they'll do that. Some of the things, especially with youth who maybe go missing, and when they return, look at some of the signs that they may have bring back with them. They may have, and as we teach this to law enforcement all the time, they may have hotel key cards in their possession. You're a 16-year-old girl. How'd you rent a hotel? How'd you go? Where were you? Who rented your hotel? Also, condoms or sexual paraphernalia. If the girl's 16, she has one condom, I'm not really going to make a big deal about that. But she has like 30 in there, and then also other sexual devices and lubricants. That's a red flag. That's a huge red flag. For our medical folks, we do a lot of training up in Baltimore. All the hospitals, all the EDs, all the fire department folks, and we teach them about not being able to speak for themselves. So you'll have somebody who insists on speaking for them. They may have their ID. Where's your ID? Oh, my boyfriend has it. Why does he have it? Because he's controlling her. That's exactly why she has it. But again, that one thing is not allowing to speak for themselves. So if we have any medical professionals in here, I see one up here, and if you get that situation where somebody wants to talk for them, it could be labor trafficking or sex trafficking, especially if they speak a different language and they want to translate for you. Never allow a family member or somebody like that to translate for them, because you may ask them, hey, are you okay? And they're probably screaming for help, and the person translating is like, oh yeah, they're doing great. They love it here in America. No problems here. So never do that. So another thing is bruising in various stages of healing, and we stress this amongst our medical professionals who are examining. So you may have a victim who has a fresh bruise. We all know what a fresh bruise looks like, a little nasty black and blue, and they have that on their thigh, and they're like, oh, what happened to you? Oh, I fell down. Okay. But if you look on their arm, on their shoulder, or their other thigh, they have another bruise that's maybe 4 or 5 days old and starting to yellow up a little bit. So bruising in various stages of healing indicates to me a pattern of abuse. That is something that they've been going through week after week after week, where they didn't make enough money because they have a quota, and if they don't make their quota, they get beat. And that shows me the patterns of abuse. There's a couple other ones. I'll save some for Heather. If you have anything you want to add on to that, the warning signs.
Yeah, if you're looking at, especially with young people, sometimes it's looking like they're suddenly come into money. Maybe children who before did not have their nails done or did not have name brand clothing or things like that, or maybe clothing that seems a little age inappropriate or suggestive. Not always, but sometimes those are signs of that. Regarding looking for things online, a lot of times what we're hearing is that people will have multiple profiles, and some that really have nothing to do with a family or friends circle, that actually they won't accept their friends and their loved ones' request on certain Facebook profiles. Sometimes that is a red flag as well. Sometimes it's just a teenager that doesn't want their nosy parents meddling around in their, I forget what they call it now. Is it my dump account? It used to be a Finsta, but now I think it's called a dump account, right? But yeah, sometimes it's a situation like that, but looking for some gradual changes in personality, some shifts in who they once were versus who they are now. Sometimes it's just a growth factor, but sometimes it can be a little something more. And I think if you're just seeing a lot of overall change that doesn't make sense is probably the biggest red flag. I will also say that people sometimes become much more outgoing as opposed to much more reclusive. And I think sometimes people expect the reclusivity that is kind of stereotypical of things like movies, like Tom was mentioning. And I think understanding, too, the difference between human smuggling and human trafficking. I think a lot of times people picture, 18-wheelers, tractor trailers loaded down with humans being smuggled across state lines for the purposes of sex or labor trafficking. And to Tom's point, it just very rarely looks like that. It really most often is somebody who just kind of got caught up in a situation that became out of control at some point.
Real quick, a couple other points. Missing kids, especially missing runaways who run away multiple times. We focus our attention on kids who run 3 or more times, and they become chronic, or they're gone for more than 30 days. Statistics show that they're high risk. They're the ones who are going to be trafficked. They're the 1 in 6 or 1 in 7 that are going to be sex trafficked, 100%. So focus your attention on those kids who go missing, Because you got to remember, these kids who go missing or gone for more than 30 days and are walking the streets of Baltimore or D.C. or Philly, they're running from something or running to something. None of them are running because there's any joy and fun in doing it. There's no thrill in it. It may be for the first 24 hours until they get the Jesus scared out of them, and then they don't have any money, and next thing you know, they're committing sex acts for money. Another thing is their romantic partner is not equal with their age. You know, you have a 16-year-old girl, and she goes, "Oh, that's my boyfriend," and that dude's like 32. Now, there are not many 16-year-olds going out with 32-year-old men. Okay, that's a huge red flag in my book, but we see it because traffickers tend to be a little bit older because they know how to manipulate the mind and the brain of these young victims and manipulate them and literally fill the holes that they have missing in their lives because they're going after the kids who got problems. They're not going after straight-A students. They have, and I've had a couple cases like that, but they're rare. They're going after the ones that are easily exploited.
Just to piggyback off of something that Tom said very quickly, but this was a mall case that I had back in Anne Arundel County a long time ago, and it was a situation where a girl met a guy in a mall. Tom said that's where they used to kind of go looking for victims, and she was younger. She was, I think, 15 or 16. He was in his early 20s. They fell into a pattern of what she thought was a boyfriend-girlfriend relationship. For her, this was very much a real relationship. It obviously created ripples at home. Mom and dad did not want, she came from an intact family. She was none of the red flags that people typically think of. She came from an intact family, very involved parents. She was a great student. But mom and dad just had a bad feeling, and they were spot on. Eventually, this girl did run away with this man, and they were staying in hotels for a period of time, and then, of course, they ran out of money, and he started with a sob story. "You're going to have to go back home. We can't live like this. Your parents are going to, find me, and I'm going to go to jail. We can't keep hiding." And she, of course, didn't want to go home. And, of course, he offered up, well, there is something you could do to help us make money so we could stay together. And it led, obviously, he was a trafficker. He was not her boyfriend, but she very much fell into a circumstance where she thought this was a real relationship. And then, of course, she thought that her actions were voluntary. So she had a hard time identifying as a victim even once she was recovered. The other thing, and I won't talk about this long because I know we have to keep moving, but I'm going to give you your first piece of homework tonight because this is something I really don't have an answer for yet, but it's something that I find very fascinating. Go home tonight and look up the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children's website. And just look, you can look at the missing child posters, and if you just look at the most recent ones that were posted, look how many that Virginia has up. Compared to Maryland and every other state, I'm not sure what Virginia is doing to get the exposure, but they are getting their children listed on the website so much more quickly than we are here in Maryland, and every other state is as well. And that is one of the projects that we are working on at GoCap to try to figure out how we can expedite getting children listed as missing and endangered, like Tom said, because they are endangered runaways sometimes, but they're not throwaways. They are still somebody's child. They are still a human and a child. And I think that a lot of times, absolutely no offense to law enforcement, I have nothing but love for law enforcement, but I think a lot of times when they see children performing sex acts voluntarily, they see them as child prostitutes, and there is no such thing. Children cannot prostitute themselves. We have to do something to switch the mindset. And I really feel like NCMEC, National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, and getting that exposure and identifying them as missing and endangered children, as opposed to, just kind of throwaways, really might help to switch that mindset some.
Such good information. Susan, did you have anything that you wanted to add?
I just wanted to circle back to the importance of the internet and the vulnerabilities that exist there. And as Tom, we've discussed, the traffickers prey on the vulnerable, and it is often at a bus stop or, a runaway, etc. But it's also our children and anyone who is struggling with mental health, who is online, and our children, our families, our neighbors have access. The traffickers don't just have access to them, but our children and our community people online have access to those individuals and have access to things like cash apps. They have access to the ability to sell their services and earn money, and the inequity in poverty, et cetera, that is often a motivation for individuals. Again, here on the Eastern Shore, this is how it shows up. It's motivation for individuals to do things that they might not do otherwise, and or if they have a need to for housing, for if there's drug addiction, et cetera. It's very easy with the use of the internet to get involved, to become even more vulnerable, and to become a victim of this kind of exploitation.
I think those are such great points. And, when we work with victims at the agency, we talk about the fact that this isn't just an over-there problem. It's kids in our private schools locally. It's kids in the public schools here. It's within our 5-county region. Our agency has a regional navigator screening human trafficking part of our mental health assessment. And so we're able to, through the Rape Crisis Center and the wonderful work that Christy leads, be able to identify the human trafficking victims. So Susan, we are just so blessed to have you, and I know that you first got introduced to the human trafficking population in the detention centers in both Dorchester and Caroline County. What is it that you want our community to know about the importance of an integrated response and the importance of why this problem becomes so complex, but why we need everybody in it?
So yes, I first started with For All Seasons as the Tamar coordinator, working in the detention centers. And our first a year or so ago, the January is Human Trafficking Awareness Month. And so I tried to bring that information into the detention center. I knew nothing about trafficking. I, too, thought it was like what is conveyed in The Sound of Freedom or some other, Hollywood film. But quickly learned that trafficking is here. And the more I learned about it and the more I shared with the women in the detention center, the more obvious it became that a good majority of them are in that situation. And clearly they are vulnerable. There's drug addiction, there is poverty, et cetera. But the individuals that we were working with, as we started to try and educate them about, wait a minute, this individual who's putting money on your books, this individual who is your boyfriend, he's out there in Cambridge, he's trafficking you, and he's trafficking likely another, large number of other victims in the community. So one of the things that we started to experience was trying to get the individual, one particular individual that I was working with, to get her to understand that she is a victim of trafficking. And again, because they don't often identify as a victim, it took a very long time to convince her that that might be the case, to build that trust. And I emphasize that because, again, this is a long-term effort, a collaborative effort. It took the corrections officers in the detention center to begin to understand and to begin to share that same information with her. Upon her release, it took the community members Harriet's house, there's a safe house in the area, working with that individual, working with others to try and get the transportation, to try and then get her the services that she needs in terms of her drug addiction. It takes a village, it takes all of the services that are available to an individual, and it's a long-term process. As Heather said, it'll often be 6, 7, 8 contacts, 8 times of an attempt to try and help someone, to get them to understand. We, in the Rape Crisis Center, again, For All Seasons has been doing this work for a long time. For how many years? 4, 5. Right, and now it's changing because we have the Regional Navigator Program. This problem crosses county lines, it crosses jurisdictions, it crosses state lines. And so when we have an individual who we respond to at the ER, and it becomes apparent that they are a victim of trafficking, it takes the forensic nurses, it takes the medical staff, it takes the law enforcement officers, it takes our advocates. This individual might need housing, they might need protection, they often need the education and the mental health support to understand the situation that they are in. It's often dangerous. And this is happening all the time. It's happening. Again, I'll go into my little bit of Human Trafficking 101, which I'm eager to share with as many people as possible in the community, that trafficking doesn't know any boundaries. Traffickers can be anyone. Individuals who become victims of trafficking can be anyone, young, old, rich, poor, LGBTQ, male, female. There is no clear definition, and that's part of the challenge with responding to this problem, that it is a hidden crime, so it takes everyone to stay aware and to be vigilant and to be willing to speak up and to know how to report, and it takes a compassionate, trauma-informed, professionals to be able to recognize the problem as such and be able to begin to collaborate and work together, communicate together in order to help an individual move forward in their lives, move out of that situation. And we haven't even talked about prosecution. That's a whole other matter.
That'll be part 2.
Yes.
And as Susan, as you were talking, it also just reminds me to give you all a glimpse as to how the Human Trafficking Regional Navigator Program shows up across the state. So Susan is talking about something that happened in Dorchester County. For All Seasons doesn't do overnight housing, but the beauty of the Regional Navigator Program is that we can call the executive director at Life Crisis Center in Salisbury, who does have overnight housing. And so the whole premise of the Regional Navigator Program is that something can be happening here. We don't have to have every single resource as the entity that is serving as the navigator. The beauty of the program is that we can then be working with Life Crisis Center, who is our sister Rape Crisis Center in Salisbury. We can call the House of Ruth that's across the bridge. And the whole beauty of the program is that we are all connected in a consortium. Susan sits on the task force and is able to say, hey, here's the problem that we've run into. We got really far with this one case, but we got stuck here. And I think that's a really important piece for you as the community to understand that while For All Seasons is able to provide a host of services and be able to be there, as Heather talked about, in that day by day capacity, there's also 16 other rape crisis centers and advocates across our state that are working in tandem with us to be able to say, hey, For All Seasons is doing great work. We didn't do billboards like this 5-6 years ago. We know now that part of helping people understand that human trafficking exists, you got to throw a billboard on Route 50, because people have to understand that Route 50 is also a corridor where people are being trafficked. We know that Ocean City has a large human trafficking problem that's happening, and so we have to be able to support the folks down in Wicomico and Somerset counties to be able to say we can support in other ways as well. I do want to give an opportunity. I know that we have some folks on Facebook who, so hi to everybody on Facebook, because not only are we here live with you tonight, but we're also live streaming. And so I do want to give an opportunity to open up to Q&A to both you here in the theater and then also to our folks on Facebook. So if you have questions, if there's anything that you'd like to ask the panelists, would you please raise your hand, and we'll start right there. There's a hand. There we go. There's a microphone for you.
Okay. I was just wondering, first of all, how many people For All Seasons is currently servicing? And it seems like job skills and jobs, after counseling and help with drug addiction, jobs might be a key place. And how do you ferret people to, maybe some people need to learn job skills or ferret them to jobs so that they can get away from that, their dependence on this other person and making money that way?
Yeah, sure. So I can tell you that over the last quarter, when we've been looking at our numbers, that there's an average of 10 to 12 victims that are coming through our Rape Crisis Center on a monthly basis who have indicators of human trafficking. And so we are working with those clients. And one of the things, and I love your question about the workforce, because again, we don't have to do it all under one roof. And so part of what we do is we work with our local workforce training folks. We work with the business community. You know, one of the things that Susan does beautifully is go out and present to communities so that there is an understanding in the workforce. Economic development, it becomes a really important part of being able to wrap around human trafficking victims that that wouldn't have services otherwise. And so being able to connect within the community is one of the ways that we can skill people up. And Heather, I'll allow you to also answer.
Yeah, I just wanted to piggyback on that and say that we, some of our navigators actually do partner with workforce development companies that will train people how to be nursing assistants or all different types of things, both male and female type of industry work, the stereotypical male and female type of industry work, and help women cross some of those lines as well into typically more male-dominated fields. We also do fund some economic empowerment and economic development programs, sometimes in the regional Navigator grants, but mostly in some of our other funding streams through GoCap.
We have a question from Facebook. Someone said, what are some not so obvious signs to look for, and how do I help or report?
Well,
Go ahead, Susan.
Tom, talk about the hospitality industry and the not so obvious signs that sometimes where trafficking is showing up in our neighborhoods or in...
Yeah, I mean, we only, most of the things we talked about today was sex trafficking, but there's also labor trafficking, especially here on the shore, because you have a tremendous amount of agriculture. Any place where you have somebody has to pick a crop with their hands because the machine will damage it. There's a likelihood there could be human trafficking there. The hotel industry, our seafood industry here on the Eastern Shore, the crab picking, you can possibly have human trafficking there as well. Landscaping, construction work, magazine peddling crews. There's a van comes into the neighborhood and drops off a bunch of kids, and they go out and sell subscriptions to magazines or buy candy bars from our New Jerseys, from a team that doesn't really exist. This is a huge case in Georgia. A buddy of mine worked for Georgia Bureau of Investigation, did a case down there, and it was a magazine subscription crew. And they were trafficking these young kids, forcing them to go out into the neighborhoods. So it may look like that. Indentured servitude, especially where I was in Montgomery County, we had a lot of diplomats that lived in there, and they would bring people over from other countries and literally make them become their nanny or do house cleaning and everything from 6 in the morning to 11 at night. They weren't allowed to go out. They weren't allowed to make a phone call. They weren't allowed to do anything. And if they acted up, they would threaten them that I'm going to call ICE and have you deported. And they believed that. So, and how do you reach somebody like that? What are the signs of that? How do you even know? A lot of times it's on Sunday when they get to go to church. That is the one time that they're allowed out. We did a case with somebody that they were held captive literally from 6 in the morning to 11 at night. They were forced to stay. They slept in the basement on the floor, but they let them go to church. So think about that. So next time you're sitting in services and you see somebody that may look a little disheveled or just doesn't look right, and the thing with human trafficking, the worst thing you can do is go up to somebody and say, "Excuse me, are you a victim of human trafficking?" Unless you want to get cussed out, because that's what's going to happen to you. When we teach firefighters and we teach the EMTs and we teach the law enforcement, let them know that you're somebody that can help. You wonder what you can do, and you can always call the National Human Trafficking Hotline, or you can. Do you guys have a hotline?
Yeah,
sure do.
24/7.
There you go, 24/7 right here. All right. You can always call For All Seasons, or call the National Human Trafficking Hotline wherever you are. If you see something, say something, because you're gonna. Because I talked to somebody and it ate him up inside. He goes, "I saw something. I was pretty sure this girl was being trafficked, but I didn't do anything, and just let her walk away." And it ate that person up inside. So if you see something, say something. But if you are in a situation where you're a teacher or EMT, and you have the opportunity to intercede, let them know that you're somebody who can help. If you are in a situation that's not safe for you, or you didn't think that your life was going to turn out like this, and you want to change, we can help you, because we have resources here. We have them here on the shore. We have them in the city. We have them everywhere, and they're accessible to you. You just have to make the phone calls.
Thank you so much for that answer. I know that we're getting close to our time, so I want to move on to see if there's any other questions. I'll repeat the question once she asks it. So the question is, working in the real estate industry, are there signs or things that they as real estate agents should be looking for within the communities that they're working in?
I actually lifted my mic because I was going to mention that after Tom stopped talking, but Tom and I actually did. Sorry, Tom. It's been a couple years, but Tom and I did a presentation for the Maryland Association of Realtors a few years back, and it was about looking for the signs in mostly rental properties, because sometimes you're going in there, sometimes you're dealing with management companies who are going in and doing inspections and things like that. And we talked about, just looking for things that feel off, like an environment that doesn't really feel like a home or doesn't really feel lived in. Looking for trash cans overloaded with condoms and excess amounts of lube, and something beyond, adult activities between consenting adults in a household. Camera equipment set up, especially really elaborate camera equipment.
Locks on every door.
Yes, locks on every door. Things like that. Looking at a lot of times the rooms almost look like they have backdrops, or they're more decorated or put together than the other areas of the house, and maybe the kitchen doesn't look like it's really ever been used or lived in, and things like that. But Maryland does. We did do a presentation for the Realtors Association. It's been a couple years now. We probably need to circle back if you're asking that question.
Great. I just quickly want to say that's a good point about how our community, everyone in the community, business members, et cetera, it's realtors, it's postal workers, delivery people, inspectors, home inspectors, everyone who's, in the neighborhood and looking around, they need to be
Uber
alert
drivers.
and aware. Yeah, Uber drivers.
I see you. You have a mic.
I'm Renee Morrell from the Maryland Human Trafficking Task Force Public Awareness and Baltimore City Collaborative. And I wanted to say something about the obvious things like gaming, because so many of our children are gaming online. And I wanted to say that when they're online talking to anybody all over the country, and they think they're talking to someone their own age, and it's so very easy. A lot of sextortion cases, but a lot of sexual exploitation is coming about from children just gaming. And all of our kids, almost all of our kids, are doing some kind of online behavior. They're talking to strangers online. So it is so much education out there on how to look for that, what to look for, and how to help identify when you think your child or somebody's child may be online with risky behavior online, since they're online so much.
And the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, Heather talked about it, NCMEC, it's missingkids.org is their website. They also have some online safety courses for resources for parents.
And they can help get the images off.
Yeah, and they, yeah.
Thank you for adding that. We'll go here and we'll go here.
About 2 years ago, I had the pleasure of attending a sextortion presentation at my daughter's school. And I was wondering what kind of work you're doing for the youth, for awareness, or just, letting them know exactly what's happening, because, these kids know everything these days. And I think it's just the exposure to the information that can also just bring an awareness. So just wondering what work
Take
you're
it,
doing.
Susan.
All right. So this is one of my passion areas. I mean, it's so important that we educate our youth, that we educate our parents, the adults in their lives, to be aware and to be vigilant about their use of the internet. It's gaming, it's the apps, it's any way they communicate with their friends, Instagram, TikTok, et cetera, et cetera. But it's also understanding some of the things that we're doing are trainings in the area, and I invite you to invite us to come and speak with your group. We're eager to get into the schools. I was lucky enough to present at the Talbot Public County Schools and the PE teachers and the health teachers. And it's always incredibly eye-opening, and people want the information, they need the information. But we're also working with the YMCA, Chesapeake. We're working to, I'm going to be training the counselors, the camp counselors. We're looking to work with the Boys and Girls Club, any of these organizations where youth are working with youth. And we are also doing a training, Train the Trainer, Love 146. We're bringing in an incredible program through For All Seasons to train some other individuals to become trainers with this very, very valuable youth education program. But helping the children to understand who they are, what they value, how where the risks are, and boundaries, consent, about all of those things is just absolutely essential to help from a prevention standpoint. So we are doing as much as we would like to do more, but communicating with our youth, being aware and being open, talking to them about what they're doing online, who they're talking to, what apps they're using. It's really essential that adults are aware. We need to teach our youth about how to be in the world. We also need to teach them how to be on the internet. It's at the heart of the matter.
Absolutely. And we're really blessed, especially here in Talbot County. Sharon Pepakai is a member of the board at For All Seasons, and she's really supportive of the work that we're doing, and she has been wonderful about digging into this issue with us right here in our own county. And we continue to be able to also then work with Caroline County Public Schools and working in some of their vocational education programs. And so it's really been a wonderful marrying of services and collaborations to be able to say this is important, and the teachers are so hungry for the information. So it's really been a great partnership. This is our last question.
So I was just going to piggyback on all that and say that I feel like as a community, we all need to take our own accountability in all of the relaxed social acceptance of allowing all of these things to be okay for our children and the people in our community. Because 20 years ago we were drilled into don't speak to strangers, don't get into anybody's car you don't know, don't let anybody know where you live. And now we hand them cell phones and tablets, and they can call Uber drivers and they can call DoorDash and give all their information to anybody, and it goes to the whole country. So I think if we take our own accountability and make sure that the people we come in contact with are getting the awareness that they need, that's a start.
When Lisa Lee and I do presentations in the community, we talk about nuggets at the end, and what are the nuggets that we can take away. You have just provided us a beautiful transition to nuggets, because I think, I'm so thankful for what you have said and just sort of calling the attention to, we do have a role to play. And sometimes we might not understand, and we might say, well, I don't know how to even begin. But the small conversations and those moments of connection where we become the pain in the butt parent or the guardian or the aunt or the uncle, and just sort of doing the check-in. I have 4 teenage boys in my house, and I check in with them every night. Who are you talking to? Well, Mom, I'm talking to so-and-so. Well, who's that? Well, it's a friend of a friend. Well, then you can't be on with them because we don't know who they are. Those are the moments where we get to capture our kids in a little bit different communication. So I guess I'm going to turn to you all. And in the spirit of the nuggets and the takeaways, what is your parting thought? Because I do want to acknowledge that this conversation can be heavy. It can be hard to sit through, and it can leave us feeling like, whoa, at the end of being here for an hour and a half. So as we think about the takeaways for tonight, and Tom, I'll start with you. What are the takeaways that you want the Midshore region and the community that For All Seasons works with to know as they're leaving tonight.
Well, first, thank you for having me here. I really appreciate it.
We're grateful that you came.
I love a forum like this. It's awesome. Everyone, when you go home, grab your kid's smartphone, throw them in the trash, get them a flip phone.
Problem solved. Drop the mic.
I'm going to go take stock. Wait a little bit because I'm going to take stock in flip phones. Okay, but no, there's so much more. We literally touched the tip of the iceberg of what human trafficking really is, and some of the stuff that goes on in their brains and the trauma that they endure. They're victims like no other crime victim that I ever dealt with, and I dealt with victims of all different types of crimes as a cop, and they're the most unique victim. To understand them is the most important thing. That's how you can really get into helping them. So if you see something, say something. Just make the phone call. I'd rather have you call and we go out there and it's not human trafficking, but that's okay. That's the job of law enforcement. That's what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to go out there and look for those things. So if you see something, say something. And I'll stick around for a little bit. If you have any other questions that you're afraid to ask or we ran out of time, I'll stick around for a little bit.
Thanks, Tom.
I'm on the mayor's clock.
I will also say, like you said, like your nugget, your takeaway, that we really have blurred the lines. To your point with the technology and handing someone a phone and letting them talk to strangers and letting them get into cars with strangers, we have blurred the lines. So I think especially communicating with your own children or the children in your lives and making sure that they understand, making sure you're asking the right questions, making sure when you ask a question you don't assume an answer. Don't end a question with the word right, because then they think that you expect a certain answer. The other thing I will say, and we didn't really get to touch on it much here, but know your resources. There are a lot of resources that I'm astounded that people don't know about. And did you know that there's witness relocation funding available in every county in the state? It is free witness relocation for people who are in danger as the result of being a victim or witness to a crime. Human trafficking is really easy to make that in danger argument and access those resources. Victims of human trafficking can get free sexual assault forensic exams. The governor's office pays for those. They don't have to utilize insurance. They don't have to report to law enforcement. They can also access medications like NPEP, non-occupational post-exposure prophylaxis, which is the medication you can take to prevent the contraction of HIV. You don't have to have a safe exam if you've been sexually assaulted to access that medication free of charge. And it is a very costly medication. It's about $3,600 to $5,000 per person. The governor's office covers all of those things. So know your resources so that when you do encounter someone, whether or not they want to discuss their victimization, that you can make appropriate referrals. Oh, yes, address confidentiality program. If someone does leave a trafficking situation and wants to utilize the address confidentiality program, it's through the Secretary of State's office, and it does give them the closest thing they can get to anonymity with their location.
You're it.
All right.
Final nugget.
I want to emphasize again that the traffickers prey on the vulnerable, and the world has changed so much in the last however many years since COVID, et cetera. All the vulnerabilities that exist now with the wars, international wars, with climate crises, all of these things, and again, poverty and wealth, all of these things make us all vulnerable. And again, I emphasize the services of For All Seasons. It's, mental health is an essential part of what makes individuals vulnerable. So, I'm always eager to come out and speak with anyone, any of your groups, to educate you about the signs and some of the ways that this problem has evolved, and it has evolved. It's sort of like, it's a hidden crime. And so we all have to be alert, we all have to be vigilant, and continuing to talk to one another so we continue to learn how it shows up and how we can respond in the best way as a community.
Thank you. And I want to just give a special thank you to all of you tonight. This has really been an opportunity for us to bring some education to the community and to be able to have Tom and Heather and Susan sitting together as the experts that are serving the region. I want to acknowledge the For All Seasons staff that's in the room. We have some of our clinical team and some of our administrative team here, the folks that are showing up every day to be able to support the work of the humans. And our COO, Patty Cannon, says, I don't work directly with our clients, but I support the work that allows our staff to work with the clients. And I love that ability to be able to frame it that way, because you all have a role to play. You all have a message to share now. And my hope is that you will continue to think about this as you leave here tonight, to think about reaching out to Susan and scheduling a program. Heather talked about the resources that are needed. There's opportunities for you to be able to volunteer with For All Seasons. There's opportunities for you to be a part of the fundraising that supports the victims of human trafficking. And so I just want to say to all of you online and to you all here in person, thank you for making this a priority. I know that this is a time where you could be many places tonight, and the fact that you're here and that there are so many of you filling the theater really says a lot about how our community cares for everyone. For All Seasons serves everyone regardless of their ability to pay. We don't care what the socioeconomic status is, what the race is, what the gender is, what the LGBTQ or not identifying is. We want everyone to know that our services are here and available. And so please continue to spread the word of services are here. There's no wait list at For All Seasons, and we are here to be able to continue to serve our community with mental health and therapy and victim services and education. So thank you again for being here tonight, to Tom and to Heather and to Susan and to the Avalon staff who helps us put this together every time. Thank you so much.